The weight of pain. It is as old as humanity itself, as ancient as the first footsteps of our ancestors across barren landscapes, as constant as the rhythm of the heart. It comes in countless forms: loss, betrayal, failure, loneliness, injustice. Yet despite its universality, there is one peculiar truth about human suffering. We spend endless hours trying to explain it. We narrate our pain, justify it, rationalize it, and seek the understanding or validation of others. Why do we do this? Why, when faced with the raw, unrelenting weight of life's blows, do we instinctively reach outward, searching for empathy, approval, or acknowledgement? Perhaps it is because society has taught us that suffering is a story to be shared, a burden to be witnessed. From social media confessions to therapy sessions, from public apologies to political grievances, our culture encourages us to externalize our discomfort. Pain becomes a spectacle, an argument, a plea, and in doing so, we unwittingly surrender a piece of ourselves. Nietzsche once wrote that suffering, when embraced, could become the catalyst for strength, for transformation. He spoke of the fire that pain ignites within, the force that can forge resilience in the crucible of adversity. Eastern philosophies echo this sentiment, teaching detachment, not as a denial of pain, but as mastery over its influence. The message is clear. The moment we stop projecting our suffering, the moment we stop explaining it to the world, we reclaim the energy that was lost in seeking permission or understanding. Yet modern culture resists this quiet revolution. We are inundated with narratives of grievance, each vying for attention, sympathy, or moral judgment. In the ceaseless echo chambers of social media, even our private wounds are weaponized, publicized, packaged, and performed. Therapy itself, for all its healing potential, can sometimes serve as a stage for performance, where articulating pain becomes a ritual of validation rather than liberation. Public discourse mirrors this phenomenon, turning suffering into argument, grief into justification, anguish into evidence. And here lies the paradox. By explaining pain, we often amplify its hold over us. By narrating it, we make it external, dependent on the reception of others. But there exists another path. One less traveled, quieter, more radical, a path where pain is not a story told, but a force harnessed, a power internalized. The question that lingers uncomfortably is this: what if true strength, true authority over your own life begins the moment you stop explaining your pain to anyone and start owning it silently? This is the journey we are about to embark upon, a journey into the hidden mechanics of suffering, the psychology of control, and the profound, almost terrifying liberation of owning your own pain. The psychology of explaining pain. Humans are storytellers by nature. From the earliest cave paintings to the most intricate novels, we have always sought to give meaning to our experiences. Pain, perhaps more than anything else, demands a story. It craves explanation, justification, and audience. But why? Why does the human mind instinctively reach outward when it hurts, instead of turning inward? The answer lies in the deep architecture of the human psyche. Psychology teaches us that we are wired for social validation. Our brains are sensitive to acknowledgement, to the recognition that our feelings are seen, understood, and accepted. In moments of suffering, this validation becomes a lifeline. Explaining pain reassures us that we are not alone, that our experiences are real, and that someone, anyone, understands. It is a mechanism evolved over millennia, ensuring survival in communal environments. When our distress was acknowledged, we gained protection, empathy, and support. But in modern society, this mechanism is both amplified and exploited. The compulsion to explain pain is also tied to identity. Trauma or hardship often becomes inseparable from who we are. By narrating our suffering, we construct a self that is legible to the world, a self that demands empathy, justice, or recognition. This identity, however, is double-edged. On one hand, it shields us from being dismissed or overlooked. On the other, it subtly anchors our power outside ourselves. Every time we explain our pain, we implicitly invite judgment, evaluation, or critique. We hand over influence to those who observe us, tethering our strength to external reception. Social psychology further reveals a pattern. The more we articulate our suffering, the more it can reinforce itself. Cognitive biases like rumination and narrative fixation make the explained pain linger longer in the mind. Each retelling is a neural rehearsal, a subtle reinforcement of the grievance, the failure, the humiliation. Over time, this cycle can trap individuals in a perpetual state of victimhood, not because their suffering is illegitimate, but because its power has been externalized rather than internalized. This is not to suggest that seeking support is inherently wrong. Human connection is essential, but there is a crucial distinction between sharing for connection and sharing as a means of justification. The former nurtures empathy, the latter diminishes autonomy. In constantly explaining pain, the individual subconsciously transfers agency to the observer. Power, in essence, slips away with every story told. There is, however, an alternative, a radical, almost counterintuitive approach. By refusing to explain, by containing and owning the pain silently, individuals reclaim the energy previously lost in seeking validation. This does not mean suppressing emotion or denying suffering. Rather, it is an act of self-sovereignty, choosing that your pain is yours, your struggle is yours, and your growth is yours alone. Internalization transforms pain from a liability into a source of mastery. It shifts the power dynamic inward, where it is unassailable, untouchable, and profoundly liberating. And here lies the unsettling truth. Society conditions us to relinquish this power. It rewards vocal grievances, public suffering, and moral justification. The quiet, the self-contained, the unspoken, these are often misunderstood, dismissed, or feared. Yet history and human psychology alike hint at the deeper potential that lies in the silent bearer of pain. The moment we stop explaining, we begin to own. The moment we stop narrating, we begin to rule, not over others, but over ourselves. Historical lessons of silent strength. History is filled with voices that never shouted, yet whose influence echoed louder than any declaration. These are the individuals who endured suffering silently, who faced adversity without the need to explain themselves, and who in doing so transformed pain into a quiet but undeniable power. To understand the magnitude of this approach, we must look beyond the noise of public grievance and into the lives of those who mastered the art of silent strength. Consider Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic emperor who ruled one of history's greatest civilizations. His life was marked by tragedy, the loss of children, political conspiracies, endless wars. Yet in his personal writings, the Meditations, he never sought sympathy or public validation. He recorded his pain for himself as a tool for reflection, self-discipline, and philosophical clarity. By internalizing his struggles, he converted suffering into a source of resilience and moral authority. His power was not measured by the accolades of others, but by his unshakable capacity to endure, to reason, and to act with intention. Similarly, Mahatma Gandhi bore immense physical, emotional, and political pain during his fight for India's independence. Yet he rarely presented himself as a victim, despite the brutality he endured. He did not explain his suffering to the world for validation. He transformed it into a disciplined practice of non-violent resistance. Gandhi's silence, his controlled ownership of pain, became a weapon far stronger than any protest or speech. It allowed him to assert moral authority in a way that was impossible for those who cried out for acknowledgement or sympathy. Even in the shadows of war, countless unnamed individuals have exemplified this principle. Prisoners of conflict, persecuted minorities, and resistance fighters often carried suffering in silence. Their pain, unspoken and internalized, became a source of clarity, strategic advantage, and endurance. In contrast, those who constantly explained their suffering, publicly documented their grievances, or sought recognition for their hardships, frequently became tools of propaganda, easily manipulated by the very powers they opposed. History teaches that society has long been conditioned to reward visible suffering while misunderstanding quiet resilience. This is not merely a moral lesson, it is a lesson in power dynamics. When pain is externalized, it invites influence from the audience. When pain is internalized, it becomes a private force, shaping decisions, fortifying will, and creating agency that cannot be controlled or borrowed by others. Silent strength is dangerous because it cannot be measured, predicted, or co-opted. It exists beyond the gaze of society, yet its effects ripple through the world in profound ways. This phenomenon is not confined to famous figures or epic battles. It is present in everyday life. Parents enduring hardship to protect their children, individuals quietly overcoming personal trauma, workers silently mastering challenges that others would publicly dramatize. These acts often go unnoticed, yet their cumulative effect shapes societies, communities, and cultures more profoundly than the loudest complaints or grandest appeals for recognition. By examining these historical lessons, one principle emerges clearly. The act of owning pain silently is a form of radical sovereignty. It is a rebellion against the compulsion to seek validation, a refusal to surrender personal power to observers, and a conscious choice to convert suffering into mastery. While the world obsesses over explanations, public narratives, and external acknowledgement, those who master the silent art of pain transform their lives into a testament of internal authority. The question remains, if history has repeatedly shown the power of silent strength, why do we continue to chase validation for our suffering in modern society? And more importantly, what could we achieve if, like the Stoics, the Gandhis, and the quiet resistors of history, we chose instead to own our pain without explanation? Modern society and the culture of explanation. In the quiet recesses of history, suffering was often private, internalized, and transformative. Today, it has become a public performance. Modern society thrives on the explanation of pain. Social media platforms, 24-hour news cycles, and viral outrage culture have created an environment where every grievance is amplified, every wound is broadcast, and every hurt is dissected for consumption. Pain, once a private force of personal growth, has been externalized, commodified, and judged. We live in a world where visibility equates to legitimacy. The louder the story of suffering, the more weight it carries in public discourse. Each post, each tweet, each video becomes a bid for empathy, attention, or moral validation. Society encourages the narrative of grievance, rewarding those who articulate their pain and punishing those who remain silent. And in doing so, It subtly conditions us to hand over our power. The more we explain, the more we invite judgment, manipulation, or exploitation. This culture of explanation infiltrates every layer of human interaction. Corporate structures, politics, and social institutions all exploit human tendency to externalize suffering. Victim narratives are leveraged for social influence, political gain, and even marketing. Public suffering is monetized. Private pain becomes currency. In this environment, the act of narrating your own hardship can inadvertently make you a participant in a system designed to extract your energy, attention, and authority. Yet the allure of sharing is irresistible. Humans are social creatures. We are wired to seek acknowledgement, connection, and understanding. In moments of pain, the impulse to explain is natural, almost automatic. Posting a personal grievance online or recounting a traumatic event is not inherently wrong. It is a product of our evolution, a reflection of our desire for social validation. But the trap lies in its unconscious repetition. The more we externalize, the more we relinquish control, and the more dependent we become on the response of others for our own sense of worth. Modern therapy culture, while offering tremendous healing potential, is not immune to this pattern. Sessions often transform into rehearsals of suffering where articulating pain becomes a ritualistic performance rather than a step toward internal mastery. Likewise, public discourse glorifies outrage, amplifying complaints to the point where the act of explaining suffering becomes performative. The consequence is subtle yet profound. Power drains from the individual and flows outward, captured by those who observe, judge, or exploit the narrative. And yet within this chaos, a quieter, almost radical alternative exists. Choosing not to explain does not mean suppressing emotion or denying reality. It is a conscious act of self-sovereignty, a refusal to hand over your energy and authority to others. Silence becomes an act of rebellion against societal conditioning. Internalizing pain shifts the locus of control inward, allowing the individual to reclaim the power that is otherwise dispersed with each explanation. In a society obsessed with public recognition, internal mastery becomes a rare and formidable strength. Those who learn to own their suffering quietly operate beyond the predictable mechanisms of influence, judgment, and exploitation. They are free from the need for validation, immune to manipulation, and capable of channeling pain into deliberate action and strategic insight. The question becomes unavoidable. In a world that rewards explanation, what might happen if we instead chose silence? What might we reclaim if we stopped narrating our suffering and allowed pain to work its transformative force within us, untethered from external validation? The answer lies in the quiet reclamation of power, the subtle mastery that only comes when society's demand for explanation is met with deliberate stillness. The neuroscience of owning power. Pain is not merely an abstract experience. It is a chemical and neurological reality. Every ache, every heartbreak, every humiliation triggers reactions in the brain, complex, precise, and evolutionary in origin. Understanding these mechanisms reveals a startling truth. How we process suffering determines not only our emotional state, but our capacity for power. When we externalize pain, when we explain it to others, our brains are engaged in a continuous loop of validation seeking. Neural circuits associated with reward, dopamine pathways, activate in response to acknowledgement or empathy from others. Each comment, each word of consolation temporarily relieves stress, reinforcing the behavior of explanation. The danger is subtle. The brain begins to link relief with external approval rather than internal mastery. Power, in this sense, becomes contingent on others' reactions. We are neurologically handing our control to the audience. Internalizing pain, on the other hand, rewires the brain in profoundly different ways. Neuroscience shows that when individuals process suffering privately without seeking validation, stress responses are contained within the self-regulatory systems of the body. The prefrontal cortex, the seat of judgment, decision-making, and self-discipline, strengthens its connection to the limbic system, the emotional center. This neurological integration enhances emotional regulation, reduces impulsivity, and allows for deliberate action even under pressure. In simpler terms, internalized pain transforms chaos into clarity, suffering into strategy. Studies of trauma and resilience reveal a similar pattern. Individuals who experience adversity without reliance on external validation demonstrate higher levels of neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to adapt and rewire itself. Their cognitive flexibility, problem-solving skills, and stress tolerance surpass those who habitually narrate their suffering. Pain, when owned silently, becomes not a burden but a tool, a forge for mental strength, sharpened by discipline rather than diluted by dependency. Psychologists refer to this as the locus of control. Those with an internal locus of control believe they can influence outcomes through their own actions. Those with an external locus of control perceive the world as reactive to forces beyond them. Explaining pain repeatedly, whether to friends, family, or an audience, shifts the locus outward. By contrast, owning pain internally fortifies the individual's sense of agency. The power to act, to endure, and to transform is reclaimed from the outside world and lodged firmly within the self. This is not a call for emotional suppression. On the contrary, neuroscience underscores the importance of acknowledging pain fully, but privately, deliberately, and consciously. By observing suffering without the need to broadcast it, the brain can integrate experiences, strengthen resilience, and convert negative energy into purposeful focus. Each internalized hardship becomes a reservoir of strategic insight and quiet authority. The implications are profound. The act of silence is not passive. It is neurological, psychological, and philosophical mastery. It is a reclamation of the very systems that dictate human experience. Those who own their pain silently do more than endure. They transform their suffering into a private engine of power. The mind, once a battlefield of external validation, becomes a laboratory of inner sovereignty, where pain is no longer a liability, but the very foundation of mastery. Practical pathways to owning your pain. Understanding the power of internalized pain is one thing. Applying it in everyday life is another. The path to owning suffering silently is not about denial or suppression. It is about conscious mastery. It is a deliberate cultivation of habits, mindset, and discipline that transform pain from a chaotic force into a tool for growth and agency. The first step is awareness. To own pain, we must confront it honestly without projecting it outward. This begins with introspection, observing emotions as they arise, acknowledging their presence, and resisting the urge to narrate or justify them to others. Journaling can be a powerful ally, not as a means to share suffering, but as a private forum to analyze, contextualize, and process it. Writing transforms fleeting feelings into tangible understanding, allowing the mind to externalize internally, creating clarity without ceding power. Meditation and mindfulness are equally critical. By sitting with discomfort, observing the mind's reaction, and remaining present with suffering. Individuals build resilience against impulsive reactions and external influence. The breath becomes an anchor. Silence becomes a refuge. Over time, this practice rewires the brain to respond thoughtfully rather than reactively, turning emotional turbulence into strategic energy. Stoic principles offer another potent framework. The Stoics advocated for a mental discipline in which adversity is met with reason, not complaint. They emphasize differentiating between what can be controlled and what cannot, focusing energy exclusively on the former. In practice, this means that external validation, acknowledgement, or sympathy are irrelevant to personal mastery. The pain remains real, but its narrative is strictly internal, owned and governed by the individual alone. Physical discipline can also reinforce internal authority. Pain in the body, through exercise, rigorous training, or endurance challenges, mirrors the mastery of psychological suffering. The body learns to endure, adapt, and convert stress into strength. This physical practice trains not just muscles, but willpower, patience, and internal control, reinforcing the neural patterns that support silent resilience. Creativity and purposeful action transform pain into output rather than obsession. Channeling emotional energy into meaningful work, whether in art, writing, innovation, or problem solving, converts suffering into constructive force. Unlike explanation, which disperses energy outward, creative engagement focuses energy inward and outward simultaneously, fostering accomplishment without dependency. Pain ceases to be a narrative for others and becomes a catalyst for achievement and influence. Equally important is the cultivation of boundaries. To own pain silently, one must resist societal pressure to justify, explain, or seek validation. This often requires saying no to unsolicited advice, social judgment, or moral expectation. Boundaries protect the internal locus of control and ensure that personal energy remains sovereign, untethered from the demands and opinions of others. Ultimately, these practices converge into a philosophy of radical self-sovereignty. Pain is no longer a liability, no longer a story to be performed. It becomes a silent reservoir of strength, clarity, and agency. Each hardship, observed, processed, and mastered internally, contributes to a mind capable of deliberate action, unwavering focus, and profound resilience. In a society obsessed with the spectacle of suffering, those who master the quiet, disciplined ownership of their pain stand apart. They operate beyond the predictable influence of validation, beyond the manipulation of public perception, and beyond the control of external forces. Their strength is invisible yet undeniable. Their authority is silent yet absolute. Through these pathways, pain ceases to demand explanation and instead becomes the most intimate, unassailable source of personal power. The dangerous beauty of silent power. There is a peculiar allure in silent power. It is subtle, almost imperceptible, yet profoundly disruptive. Those who internalize pain and refuse to explain it do not merely endure, they transform. They exist in a space that society struggles to measure or control, a place where influence is born from mastery rather than visibility. This is the dangerous beauty of silent power. Power, in its rawest form, is rarely loud. The world is conditioned to equate authority with display, speeches, declarations, social proof. But internalized strength is different. It does not seek applause. It does not beg for acknowledgement. It moves quietly, deliberate in its force, unshaken by the turbulence of public opinion. This quiet mastery carries a subtle danger. It cannot be manipulated, it cannot be exploited, and it cannot be predicted. Those who wield it operate beyond the conventional levers of societal control. The beauty of this power lies in its paradox. By refusing to explain, the individual transforms vulnerability into sovereignty. Pain, once a source of weakness, becomes a reservoir of clarity, resilience, and strategic insight. Emotional suffering, when contained, is transmuted into intellectual acuity and deliberate action. The silent sufferer knows that power is not granted by society, sympathy, or recognition. It is claimed quietly, internally, and deliberately. History offers countless glimpses of this phenomenon. Consider the leaders who influenced entire civilizations not through public grievance, but through controlled, internalized mastery of their own hardships. Consider the quiet resistors, the unsung innovators, and the anonymous survivors who endured suffering privately and emerged unshakable. Their influence is not immediately visible, yet it shapes outcomes, cultures, and societies in ways that those who constantly explain their pain rarely achieve. Yet this silent strength is dangerous, not just to those who wield it, but to those around them. It defies expectation, unsettles systems of power, and disrupts social norms. It is a quiet rebellion against the compulsion to seek validation, a refusal to participate in the endless cycle of external justification. In the hands of the disciplined, it becomes a force that reshapes lives, influences decisions, and rewrites the rules of engagement. The danger and beauty are inseparable. Silent power is dangerous because it cannot be contained. It is beautiful because it is pure. It exists in its own terms, beyond judgment, beyond spectacle, and beyond manipulation. To those who possess it, the world may appear both terrifying and exhilarating. For the first time, the individual is untethered, free from expectation, free from the need for acknowledgement, free to act from a place of internal authority. Ultimately, this is the culmination of internalized suffering, the transformation of pain into sovereignty. The moment the compulsion to explain fades, a new kind of power emerges, a power that is quiet, deliberate, and profound. The world may never fully see it, but its effects are unmistakable. In mastering the art of silent suffering, the individual steps into a realm of personal freedom and authority that few ever experience, a space where pain no longer limits and where life itself becomes a canvas for deliberate, unassailable power. Conclusion: power beyond explanation. In the end, all of human suffering converges into a single, profound truth. The moment we stop explaining our pain, we reclaim a force far greater than sympathy, validation, or recognition. We reclaim ourselves. Every wound, every betrayal, every heartbreak carries potential, not when it is narrated, but when it is owned silently. Throughout history, philosophy, and psychology, a clear pattern emerges. Those who allowed their suffering to dictate their public identity often became dependent on others for acknowledgement, validation, or redemption. Their energy was dispersed, their authority diluted, their power borrowed from the eyes and opinions of the world. Meanwhile, those who internalized their pain, who refused to narrate it, justify it, or seek permission for it, found a reservoir of strength invisible to others, untouchable by judgment and unassailable by circumstance. This is the paradox. The less the world witnesses your struggle, the more you control its impact on your life. The journey to owning pain silently is neither simple nor comfortable. Society, culture, and even our closest relationships condition us to explain, justify, and externalize. Silence can feel isolating, even rebellious, but it is precisely this quiet rebellion that births sovereignty. Internal mastery does not mean absence of emotion. It means the conversion of emotion into disciplined thought, deliberate action, and profound resilience. Pain is no longer a story for others. It becomes a tool, a teacher, and a catalyst for personal power. This is not merely theory. Across centuries, cultures, and disciplines, those who embrace the quiet ownership of suffering achieved clarity, influence, and freedom that eluded those obsessed with explanation. From the Stoics to the silent resistors of oppression, from artists to strategists, the principle holds: power is claimed inwardly before it can be expressed outwardly. To explain is to scatter energy. To own silently is to concentrate it. And so, the question that lingers is not about pain itself, it is about choice. What part of your suffering are you giving away to others? What strength are you surrendering in the act of explanation? And what might emerge if, instead, you held it within, mastering it quietly, deliberately, and unshakably? The ultimate lesson is simple yet radical. By stopping the endless narration of our pain, we step into a realm of personal authority few ever experience. The power we seek externally through recognition, validation, or sympathy exists already within us, waiting to be claimed. Pain, when owned silently, becomes the foundation of sovereignty, the engine of resilience, and the gateway to a life lived with unshakable purpose and quiet, undeniable power. In that still, unspoken space, we are free, not free from pain, but free through it, not free from suffering, but sovereign because of it. The moment explanation ends, mastery begins, and with it, the profound liberation of owning your own life entirely.